Do you spot something in the water here? It's hard to see at first, took me a few watches, but here it is slowed down. Keep your eye on the right-hand side of the screen. A creepy humanoid figure breaches the water before slipping back down below and presumably swimming to the left side of the boat because the sailor reacts, moving to the other side trying to keep his eye on the thing. This was supposedly leaked footage from the UK Coast Guard. They've been searching for a man who'd gone overboard. Whatever they spotted here though was clearly not human. The speed of this thing, the way it moves, the glowing eyes, very unsettling. This is a pretty creepy video. It was filmed in what looks like a lake, and I'm not sure where, but a dude is filming himself swimming around in the murky water. He comes up to get some air, and when he dives back down, we hear this loud growling sound. Take a listen to this. And the idea of swimming out in the lake alone and then ducking your head down underwater to see and hear that, yeah, that's a no thank you. And I'd be out of the water so fast, or I'd just have a heart attack and I would drown. Instead, cameraman decides to follow this thing though. Again, it's really effective. The sound here, the murkiness of the water, it just adds some real creep factor to the whole thing. This isn't the type of mermaid video where you're in this beautiful, blue water and it's all gorgeous. This is different. Finally though, the guy comes back up out of the water and we see this. What do you think of this one? Real or hoax? Let us know down in the comments. Can you describe what's going on here? Something's definitely in the water. This video doesn't look doctored to me. As for what it is though, I have no idea. I don't have any info on this clip. I don't know where it was filmed, or I don't know who the original uploader is. People are pretty divided in the comments too. A couple people say it looks like something eating a seal, others say an otter, crocodile, snake, Nessie, and of course possible mermaid sighting. There are also a lot of comments that are just hearts or like laughing emojis for some reason. Are those the feelings you get watching something weird undulating underwater? Like, oh. People are people okay? This next story comes to us from Reddit from a now deleted user. He worked as a fisherman though, and wrote the following. I've debated posting this for a while. I used to run deep sea charters out of Valdez, mostly halibut and black cod. Commercial and sport. Not much spooks me. I've seen weird lights, heard things I can't explain, but chalked it up to fatigue or whiskey. What happened in 2014 still bothers me. It was just me, an old-timer, Bobby, and a deckhand, Reed. We were about 100 miles offshore. Calm water, overcast skies, quiet. Around 2 a.m., Reed comes up from the stern and says, "You hear that?" We kill the engine, and sure enough, there it is. This faint echoing singing from somewhere out on the water. A woman's voice, slow and drawn out. It didn't sound recorded, it sounded wet, like it was coming from beneath us. That's when Bobby starts walking toward the edge of the deck, like he's in a daze. I grab his jacket before he leans over. He looks at me like I just woke him up from a dream. Says it felt like someone was humming right next to his ear. The singing stopped after maybe 5 minutes. We didn't say much the rest of the trip. I've worked these waters 20 years. That's the only night I've ever felt like we weren't alone out there. This next video comes out of France. Apparently a diving instructor decided to scrub through security camera footage after hearing something. So we see a woman walk in wearing nothing but a towel. She then dives into the water, pretty normal so far, aside from the fact that the woman kinda reminds me of the ghost girl from The Ring. But then the water starts to bubble and churn, like something's happening under there. And that's when we see the water start overflowing out of the pool. This woman is having quite the swim. And then we cut to security camera down below and see what looks like a webbed hand press up against the glass enclosure. This is a pretty effective video. Definitely gets the imagination going. Is it real though? I'm going to go ahead and let you be the judge of that. This has become a rather well-known piece of footage taken in 2013 off the coast of Mallorca, Spain. It has some people convinced that a real mermaid was captured on camera that day. A tourist filming from a boat caught something unusual perched on a rocky outcrop near the shore. Now, at first glance, it looks like some kind of sea creature with long fish-like tail, a bluish tint, but what is it doing out of the water? And when you get a closer look, it gets even stranger. The upper body seems oddly human, with with 2 arms and a rounded head. At first it looks motionless, almost like a statue, but then it moves. So what's really going on here? Could this be proof that mermaids exist? Is it an elaborate hoax, some clever CGI, or just someone in a costume? Let us know what you think. This man's seen and heard some very eerie stuff while out on the water. Ryan Coleman is a fisherman from New Bedford, Massachusetts, going by Sauce90 on TikTok. He's posted some pretty eerie videos on there, most of them having to do with unsettling things that he sees or hears out at sea late at night. In this first clip, he captures something swimming near the surface of the water at a pretty solid clip, keeping up with the boat. But this next part is where it gets really eerie. It's late at night and now he starts hearing this haunting cry, almost like a siren's call, coming from somewhere out in the waves.
I hear him. Where's he at? What the f is that noise, bro?
It's cool actually seeing something like this. You really get a sense of why so many sailors back in the day would spin tales of strange encounters they had out at sea, and what they could only assume were ghostly cries of mermaids luring them into the water. If you didn't know any better, that's exactly what you'd probably think too. A lot of commenters say this is most likely the sound of orcas though, but all the same, it's this pretty eerie, haunting sound. Now, fake mermaid videos are a dime a dozen. You see a lot of AI ones these days, a lot of CG ones, but this one is very well done and it's eerie, it's creepy. I do not like it. Imagine swinging around and feeling something slimy brush over your leg and then seeing this pale, horrifying looking water ghoul swimming right next to you. Now, I do not think the video is real, but it's creepy all the same. The movement of the water, the quality of the costume, it looks really good. It doesn't look like CG to me. It looks like it's actually someone in a costume, which makes it even more impressive. This took some a bit more dedication, and I don't know where it was filmed, so the mystery behind it just adds to the eeriness. From a fisherman of Reddit comes a wild story of an encounter in Oregon. It goes as follows. This happened a few years ago off the coast of Newport, Oregon. I never know if it's Oregon or Oregon. I hear it pronounced different ways. You locals will have to let me know in the comments. Anyway, continuing on. I was working on a small trawler, a 3-man crew dragging for shrimp about 40 miles out. Around 3 a.m., I'm doing a gear check alone at the stern when I hear a splash. I figure it's a dolphin or maybe a sea lion, nothing unusual out there. But when I shine my light over the side, I catch a flash of something just under the surface. Not a fish, not anything I recognized. It was pale with limbs. Long limbs. Honestly, it looked like a person swimming parallel to the boat, just below the waterline, head tilted up like it was watching me. I couldn't make out a face, just the shape. I called one of the guys over, but by the time he came out, it was gone. He laughed it off, told me I was overtired and fair. I didn't argue, but for the rest of the night, every time I passed the stern, I had this feeling like something was pacing us underwater. I've seen some weird things in trawl nets, but nothing ever gave me that feeling before. We didn't catch much that trip. I didn't sleep. I still don't like working nights after that. Now imagine you're out on the water just fishing, enjoying the day, when suddenly something huge breaches the water. Something like this. Patricia and her fiance Dave were fishing near Sanibel, Florida on October 6th of 2013 when they spotted whatever that was. They said it was at least 20 feet long, cutting through the waves at high speed before breaching the surface and twisting around, almost like it had wrapped itself around something before vanishing again. The video uploaded to the Residual Payments YouTube channel is unsettling for a couple reasons. First, the movement in the water starts on the left side and then, out of nowhere, something much further away bursts to the surface. So, what are we looking at here? Is it two creatures? Or worse, is it just one really big, fast-moving animal? Little Mermaid? More like the chonker mermaid. The next Disney classic. Now, what really sells the footage is the reaction from Patricia and Dave. You can hear them in the background and they sound genuinely freaked out. These aren't tourists mistaking a dolphin for a monster. They're Florida natives who've spent their whole lives around the water, and they were adamant that this thing was not a dolphin or a manatee. Whatever they saw that day, it left them completely baffled.
It sounds like something out out of a horror film, but in March 2025, beachgoers in Kent, England found a bizarre, washed-up object and at first thought it might be a mermaid's remains. They described it as a carved wooden creature with the tail of a fish and the torso and head of an alien-like creature. Paula Reagan, who took the photos, said, quote, "The head looked skeletal, but the back part, where the fishtail was soft and squidgy." Imagine that. A freaky fishtail thing staring back at you. Local police eventually determined it wasn't a real creature at all, but a carved figurehead or sculpture. In fact, it closely resembled images of P.T. Barnum's infamous 19th century Fiji mermaid hoax, a half-monkey, half-fish mummified oddity. In other words, it was art, not animal, but it is a perfect example of how our minds can play tricks. A bit of driftwood and carved wood looked exactly like a mermaid skeleton. So the lesson? Sometimes mermaid bones are just human-made curiosities masquerading as legend. Picture this. For decades, a small, blackened mermaid figure sat unnoticed in a Shinto temple in Japan, freakish and mysterious. Scientists finally took a close look in 2022 and were stunned by what they found. CT scans showed that the tiny mermaid, only about 30 centimeters long, wasn't a strange new animal at all, but a creepy doll made of paper, cloth, and fish parts. According to news reports, the creature, quote, looks like a monkey-mermaid hybrid. Fuzzy head, little arms, a fishy tail, but under the skin there's no skeleton. In fact, the body is mostly stuffed cloth, the face has no bones, and the tail contains fish scales. One researcher said there's no fish skeleton at all inside. Radiocarbon dating even showed it was crafted around the late 1800s. Why would anyone do this? In Edo period Japan, the legend of the Ningo was very popular. The theory is that this mermaid was created as a talisman or curiosity to attract pilgrims or bring good luck during a smallpox outbreak. In short, it was an elaborate hoax. Not a new sea creature, but it does make for a spooky story. Priests treated it like a sacred relic for generations, never guessing their mermaid was a stitched together doll of fish parts and paper. If you hear about someone finding a spiral horn on the beach, you might think unicorn, or perhaps mermaid unicorn. In fact, the long sword-like tusk of a narwhal has inspired exactly those myths. In medieval Europe, before narwhals were well known, wealthy rulers bought narwhal tusks thinking they were unicorn horns with magical powers. Princes' cups were carved from them, queens drank from them to purify water, and people definitely didn't think they came from whales. In one museum, the Cloisters in New York, an 80-inch tusk is labeled as a unicorn horn even as recently as the 17th and 18th centuries. In some seafaring legends, these ivory spirals were also called horns of the sea or linked to merpeople. So a narwhal tusk could be called a mermaid's horn in the right folklore, but it's really just the tooth of a deep-sea whale. This real artifact turned myth just shows how an ordinary sea creature can spawn wild mermaid or unicorn stories. Have you ever picked up a little black pouch on the sand and wondered if it was a mermaid's treasure? Those little leathery cases are actually called mermaid's purses, but sadly they aren't filled with pearls or coins or forks. They are shark and skate egg cases. The embryos of baby sharks or rays developing safely inside. Scientists explain that some skates and sharks don't give live birth, but instead they lay eggs sealed in these pouch-like cases. To early beachcombers, a mermaid's purse just looked like something a mermaid might carry. A conservation group notes some people believe they were purses or bags for the treasures belonging to a mermaid, but in reality, if you open one up carefully after it's hatched, of course, you'd find a tiny shark pup. So next time you see a mermaid's purse tangled in seaweed, remember it's a gift from a shark mom, not a mermaid, and it might just be best to leave it alone. One of the creepiest places you might find a mermaid is in a church, but that's exactly what happened in Cornwall, England. In the 14th century, a choir boy in Zenar disappeared, and the local legend says a mermaid lured him away. The church still has a hand-carved wooden pew end showing a mermaid with a fishtail, so worshippers literally sat next to a mermaid carving every single Sunday. This is the only medieval church bench end in England known to depict a mermaid, and the carving was likely likely inspired by this legend. Today you can still see her in the church pew. It is a fascinating blend of faith and folklore, a real wooden artifact commemorating a local mermaid myth. In 1493, Christopher Columbus wrote in his logbook that he saw 3 mermaids off the coast of Haiti. He was disappointed to find that they were not as beautiful as he expected. They looked like 3 men in the sea. But here's the twist. Almost certainly, those mermaids were not mythical sirens at all, but manatees. The Smithsonian's Ocean blog explains that Columbus's mermaids were probably the first recorded sightings of manatees, also referred to as sea cows. Manatees are big, chubby, and have round faces, not like a Hollywood mermaid, but from a distance, a tired sailor might convince himself they were human-like. Scientists point out that the order name for manatees is Sirenia, from sirens, because mariners long ago thought these gentle mammals were mermaid relatives. In some parts of Asia, the animals that inspired mermaid legends were actually dugongs, close relatives of manatees. These plump, flippered sea cows were sometimes called mermaids or spirit women of the sea, but a shocking 2022 study revealed that they are now functionally extinct in Chinese waters. Researchers interviewed fishermen and found no confirmed sightings in decades, none after 2000 actually. Old records showed plenty of dugongs and mermaids in old tales around 1960, but their numbers crashed rapidly. In short, China's mermaids have literally disappeared. This sobering fact connects back to our theme. Many mermaid myths arose when people saw strange marine mammals briefly and imagined something magical. Now science is protecting the memory of those real creatures. It is a reminder that the real ocean is changing, and sometimes, sadly, mermaid-like animals vanish entirely. Mermaid artifacts aren't only old fossils, some are part of living traditions. In West and Central Africa and even the Caribbean, many people worship a water spirit called Mami Wada, literally Mother Water. She is often depicted as a beautiful mermaid-like woman with flowing hair, sometimes holding a snake. At the Smithsonian's National Museum of African Art, an altar to her was set up in an exhibit. Even though it was just a display, visitors started treating it like a real shrine. People left coins, jewelry charms, a hairbrush, even a little toy guitar on the altar as offerings. It is a fascinating mix of art and folklore, showing that the idea of mermaids isn't just made up, it can be an active part of culture today. Archaeologists sometimes unearth the ancient influence of mermaid myths in very surprising places. In Amasra, Turkey, an excavation in 2023 uncovered a large 2nd century AD marble statue of a half-naked female figure resting on an urn. The experts believe she's a water nymph or sea spirit from Roman times. In Roman myth, there were divinities of the sea and fresh water, essentially ancient mermaid-like creatures. This statue is about 1.5 meters tall and was part of a gymnasium complex. The woman is, quote, wearing a cloak over the lower regions and leaning on an urn, which likely means that she is a nymph of water. It is a beautiful real artifact showing how the Romans blended gods and mermaid imagery. So in Turkey today, we have a 1,800-year-old sculpture of a mermaid sea goddess. Even deep in Papua, island lore hides mermaids. Archaeologists working around Lake Sentani found ancient wood carvings on the support pillars of a traditional tribal house showing mermaid motifs. This discovery was reported in 2020. The carved figure depicts a beautiful woman with long flowing hair and a fish tail. Local legend says the Sentani people's ancestors came from the Pacific Ocean, so a mermaid carving makes symbolic sense. The archaeologists say this new data gives insight into the tribe's origins, and in other words, the mermaid carving is part of their creation story. This carved mermaid is a real artifact showing how mermaid images can be woven into a culture's history. In 2005, a team of commercial divers working off the coast of Baranof Island in Alaska reportedly encountered something terrifying while performing maintenance on deep-sea pipeline. According to a declassified safety report from the contractor, 2 divers surfaced early, shaken and refusing to go back down. One claimed he saw a, quote, human face with gills staring at him from a crevice in a rock. They described the creature as having webbed hands, reflective eyes, and scales that shimmered in their flashlight beams. Locals weren't surprised. In fact, some Inuit legends speak of sea people who dwell near that exact region. They even have a name: the Kalupalik, mermaid-like beings that lure people underwater with a hum you can only hear when submerged. High up on the windswept cliffs of the Faroe Islands, a remote chain in the North Atlantic, there is a cave that few people dare enter. Inside are carvings, ancient ones, etched into the rock. They clearly depict human-fish hybrids drawn with long hair, webbed hands, and tails. According to local historians, these markings predate Christian influence in the area and may have been created by Norse explorers. But here's the twist. One panel shows what appears to be a mermaid holding a dead man's head. Creepy? Absolutely. But archaeologists can't deny the authenticity, and some believe the site was a ritual space used to ask protection from sea spirits during voyages. These weren't just artistic depictions, they were warnings. In 2013, an offshore oil rig operating in the Gulf of Mexico experienced a strange sonar reading. Something large, fast, and warm-blooded was circling the base of the platform. Assuming it was a shark, divers went to inspect the structure, but returned reporting, quote, "something strange watching us from the shadows." One diver swore he saw a pale-skinned human-like figure swimming against the current with almost no effort. He said it had no breathing apparatus, yet it was moving at least 60 feet down. Internal emails from the rig, later leaked online, referred to it as, quote, "the Mermaid incident." No formal statement was ever released, and the crew involved were reassigned shortly after. Most people think of the Fiji mermaid as a 19th century hoax, an ugly little thing that turned out to be a monkey sewn to a fish. But here's what most people don't know. There were dozens of reports of similar creatures in the South Pacific long before it became a circus attraction. Fishermen from the islands have passed down stories for generations of a creature with glowing eyes and silver fins that comes to surface during storms. Some researchers believe the, quote, "original Fiji mermaid shown by P.T. Barnum may have been a poorly preserved copy of something real because other specimens that looked nearly identical were reportedly destroyed by British colonists trying to, quote, "clean up native beliefs." In 1978, a geologist hiking near Iceland stumbled across a strange fossil embedded in a rock wall. It looked like a partial skeleton, with a humanoid rib cage, scaled lower limbs, and elongated finger bones. He turned it over to the University of Iceland for study, and then it vanished. To this day, only photographs remain. Some experts suggested it was a hoax or misidentified fish bones, but the proportions didn't match any known marine species. What's stranger is that mermaid sightings are extremely common in Icelandic folklore, especially in that region. Locals believe that fossil was proof of an evil sea witch believed to lure sailors into whirlpools and drown them. During the Cold War, Soviet submarines patrolling near the Sea of Japan recorded something bizarre on their sonar. What sounded like high-pitched singing, followed by multiple fast-moving underwater objects surrounding their vessel. At first, the crew believed it was a foreign sub, but no signatures matched known technology. One sonar technician described the singing as, quote, "almost human, but not quite." Years later, after the fall of the USSR, some of these logs were leaked to independent researchers. Many now believe the Soviets may have encountered the same mysterious beings that Pacific Island cultures describe as sea sisters, a group of female spirits or creatures who travel in pods, warning or punishing those who disturb the ocean. Off the island of Vis, off the Croatian coast, sailors have long spoken of sea girls who appear in the moonlight singing to fishermen. And in 2016, something strange happened. A group of night fishermen swore they saw 3 long-haired women sitting on coastal rocks. They were naked, appeared to shimmer in the moonlight, and vanished into the sea when approached. Initially laughed off by the public, the story gained traction when cell phone footage surfaced, brief and grainy, but showing 3 glowing shapes diving in unison. Marine biologists later confirmed the video showed, quote, "no known animal behavior," and that area is now unofficially off limits to small boats at night. This one isn't a legend, it's actually a scientific theory with some strange implications. The aquatic ape hypothesis suggests that a branch of human evolution may have adapted to life in the water, developing traits like like subcutaneous fat, breath control, and even partial webbing between fingers and toes. Mainstream science largely rejects it, but here's the strange part. People in remote coastal areas from Indonesia to Mozambique describe sightings of humanoid creatures with those exact features. Webbed hands, smooth hairless bodies, exceptional swimming speed. Could these be descendants of a lost evolutionary branch? Some anthropologists aren't laughing anymore, especially after scuba divers found handprints in underwater caves far deeper than any known human could reach without modern gear. In 1830s Louisiana, newspapers ran with a bizarre story. A fishwoman had been spotted multiple times along the banks of the Mississippi River near Baton Rouge. Witnesses described a creature with long black hair, pale skin, and fish-like lower limbs. The sightings caused panic. People refused to bathe or fish in the river, and boat captains rerouted cargo trips. What's wild is that these stories didn't go away. In 1842, a letter to the editor in the New Orleans Bee referenced an aquatic woman with haunting eyes spotted again, and even blamed her for a sunken steamboat. While no physical evidence ever surfaced, the consistency and fear surrounding these sightings make them stand out among American mermaid lore. In 2021, a team of researchers studying glacial melt near Greenland dropped a deep-sea camera into a subglacial cave. What they captured shocked them. A figure, upright, bipedal, but unmistakably aquatic. This creature hovered in the background for several seconds before darting away. The footage was dismissed by officials as, quote, distorted data, but the researchers who collected it told a different story in private. According to them, they reviewed the raw footage frame by frame and watched as the figure turned its head toward the camera, revealing wide-set eyes and thin gill slits. They called them shadow divers, beings that exist on the edge of where life should be possible. And if you ask them off the record, they'll say that we are not alone down there. In 2009, residents of a quiet coastal town in Israel called Kiryat Yam started reporting something completely bizarre. A mermaid seen lounging on rocks at sunset before diving into the sea. Dozens of witnesses claimed to see the same thing, a female figure with pale skin, a fishtail, and long dark hair. The sightings became so frequent and credible that the local government did something no one ever expected. They offered a $1 million reward for anyone who could prove the mermaid's existence. One man said he watched her do a backflip before vanishing. Another woman swore she saw her tail slap the water. News outlets across the world picked up the story, camera crews came, tourists showed up, and yet no one was able to capture solid proof. But the stories didn't stop, and here is the weirdest part. The reward still stands to this day unclaimed. When Christopher Columbus spotted land in the Caribbean, he wasn't just discovering new territory, he may have discovered a mermaid. In his 1493 ship log, Columbus described seeing 3 creatures rise from the water with the upper bodies of women and tails like fish. His exact words? They are not as pretty as they are depicted, for somehow in the face they look like men. Most historians chalk this up to a manatee sighting, but that doesn't fully make sense. Columbus was an experienced navigator, he knows what manatees looked like, and why would he mention their faces at all if it was just a sea cow? What makes this more intriguing is that other sailors on his crew also reported similar sightings. These weren't isolated events, they were shared, consistent, and written down in one of the most famous explorer journals of all time. Could Columbus have stumbled onto something we've since lost? In the rough, stormy waters between the Scottish mainland and the Outer Hebrides lies a stretch known as the Minch, and sailors have feared it for generations. The reason? A strange and sinister race of sea beings called the Blue Men. These weren't graceful mermaids, these were blue-skinned, human-sized aquatic beings who were said to control storms and drown ships. Legend says they would swim up to a boat and shout poetry or riddles at the captain. If the captain failed to answer in rhyme, the Blue Men would overturn the vessel. While this sounds like classic mythology, here's a very strange thing. This exact story has been passed down for hundreds of of years with very little variation. Sailors in that area regularly experience unexplainable equipment failure, freak waves, and vanishings. To this day, some Scottish fishermen won't sail through this area without leaving an offering in the water. Superstition or something they're too afraid to talk about? You decide. In 2012, construction crews working at 2 separate dam sites in Zimbabwe refused to return to work. The reason? They claimed that they were being harassed and even physically attacked by mermaids living in the water. This wasn't just a local rumor, it reached Zimbabwe's House of Assembly. High-ranking government officials confirmed the stoppage and admitted traditional healers were being brought in to appease the water spirits. The mermaids, known in the local Shona culture, are believed to live in deep pools and protect sacred water sources. Locals describe them as beautiful but dangerous beings who can bless or curse anyone who crosses them. Despite pressure, workers wouldn't return until ceremonies were held, and after the rituals, work resumed without further incident. That kind of mass fear, especially among adults working a government project, doesn't just come from total imagination. Something in those waters had to have scared them. In 1730, Hans Egede, a Danish-Norwegian missionary, wrote about something he saw while sailing near Greenland, a creature that defied explanation. He described it as having a human head and torso with a fish-like tail. According to Egede, the creature rose beside the boat, stared directly at the crew, then slowly sank into the sea. What makes this account so unsettling is who Hans Egede was. A serious, devout man whose writings were focused on converting Inuit populations, not really fantasy. He wasn't known for exaggeration or tall tales. In fact, many of his missionary accounts are painfully dry. So for him to suddenly document a mermaid, well, it's a bit odd. Historians today still include Egede's account in discussions of unexplained ocean phenomena. He even sketched the creature in later versions of his log. He either hallucinated or he saw something that he really couldn't explain. Japan's version of a mermaid is not the romantic beauty you'd expect. Known as the Ningo, this creature is a mix of human and fish with a grotesque twist. Golden scales, sharp claws, and a monkey-like mouth filled with tiny human teeth. According to ancient legend, eating the flesh of these creatures grants eternal life, but catching one brings disaster. In the 1800s, fishermen supposedly caught one off the coast of Shikoku Island. The creature died shortly after, but was preserved and shown to a local official. And here's where things get even stranger. Reports say its remains were later hidden in a Buddhist temple to avoid bringing misfortune. In 2022, scientists analyzed a mummified mermaid stored in a shrine. Though DNA testing showed it was likely constructed from various animals, the preservation techniques suggest someone genuinely believed it was real, so why go to such lengths if it was all just a hoax? In Serbia's Lake Varana, locals whisper about the Mermaid of Black Lake, a pale, humanoid figure with long black hair that emerges on foggy mornings. In the early 2000s, a group of hikers claimed to have seen the creature from a distance, describing it as female in shape but with unblinking white eyes and scales across its arms. When they tried to approach, it vanished into the water with a splash. What's eerie is that locals had told nearly identical stories for decades, even before modern media could influence the narrative. In 2013, an Icelandic diving team exploring an underwater cave near Greenland captured something odd on camera. The footage, which was briefly circulated online before being lost, showed a humanoid figure with fins darting behind a rock. The diver filming could be heard screaming underwater before the camera cut out. Though skeptics cried hoax, the divers themselves, experienced professionals, stood by what they saw. Some believed the footage was confiscated due to its implications, and it doesn't help that government bodies reportedly shut down that cave to public access not long after. In the 1940s, fishermen off the coast of Benin, West Africa, claimed to have found what looked like a mermaid corpse tangled in their net. The body, which reportedly had webbed hands, fish-like skin, and a mostly human skull, was taken to local authorities. But within days, it was removed by officials and allegedly flown to France for study. Nothing was ever released to the public, and what makes this case so strange is how many unrelated locals swore swore they saw it and how quickly it was covered up. Some claim it was part of the Mami Wada legend, a powerful mermaid spirit worshipped across West Africa. In 1967, a ferry captain off the coast of British Columbia saw something on the rocks that stunned him. He wasn't alone. Passengers on board reported seeing a blonde-haired mermaid lounging on the rocks near Main Island. Photos were taken and one even made it to a local newspaper. Some said it was a prank, but others insisted that it was real. In fact, the town embraced the story so much they started selling mermaid souvenirs. The strange thing, no one ever came forward to claim it as a hoax. No models, no performers, no confessions, just a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Imagine you've been at sea for months. You're dehydrated, sunburned, and slowly losing your grip on reality. Then, suddenly, you spot a figure rising from the waves. Long arms, a rounded face, and what looks like a tail sliding beneath the surface. You've just seen a mermaid. Or so you think. In reality, you've met a manatee. Christopher Columbus himself wrote about encountering mermaids in the Caribbean in 1493, though he admitted they were, quote, not as beautiful as they are painted. Harsh, but understandable. Manatees are large, gentle marine mammals that can grow over 13 feet long and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. But when they float upright to breathe, cradle their young, and glance towards a ship, it's not hard to see why sailors, hyped up on rum and desperation, thought they'd found something magical. It's one of the clearest examples of myth meeting biology. If the manatee is the mermaid of the Atlantic, the dugong is her cousin in the Indian Ocean. These guys are smaller, more streamlined relatives of manatees, and they've also played a major role in mermaid lore across Southeast Asia, East Africa, and even Australia. What's eerie is how these guys nurse their babies. They do it upright, so if you're watching from a boat, it looks like a human woman holding a child while floating in the sea. Add long, flipper-like arms and a tail that tapers like the classic mermaid fin, and the illusion becomes downright spooky. Ancient cave paintings and oral traditions from Malaysia and Papua New Guinea depict sea women that match these guys' anatomy almost exactly. There's even evidence that early sailors created fertility charms modeled after them, thinking they'd witnessed a sacred being. Turns out mermaids might have had tusks and whiskers this whole time. It has the body of an eel, the head of a dragon, and teeth like a medieval torture device. Meet the frilled shark, one of the most bizarre and ancient creatures still swimming in the oceans today. This deep-sea predator can grow over 6 feet long and really hasn't changed much in over 80 million years. When it surfaces, which is rare, it sends shivers down the spine. Its gaping jaws are filled with over 300 needle-like teeth arranged in rows, and its body moves in snake-like waves, exactly the kind of horror that fuels darker mermaid legends. In Celtic and Scandinavian folklore, there are stories of sea maidens with sharp teeth who lured fishermen to their deaths. Japanese Ningo tales describe mermaids with a grotesque face and a body like a serpent. Many of these descriptions match the frilled shark far more closely than the romanticized Disney version that we're used to. It's the kind of creature that makes you wonder if sailors are seeing mermaids or monsters. You're floating in calm waters when suddenly a massive silver ribbon glides beneath your boat. It's over 30 feet long, has glowing fins, and moves like it's dancing. That's not your imagination. That's an oarfish. These rare deep-sea dwellers are the longest bony fish in the ocean and live thousands of feet below the surface. But when they're sick or dying, they float upward, and that's when humans get a glimpse. Ancient sightings of sea serpents off the coasts of Norway, Greece, and even the Pacific Islands often describe shimmering finned creatures with a crown-like head. That matches the oarfish almost perfectly. In Japanese folklore, oarfish are known as messengers from the sea god's palace, and their appearance is believed to predict earthquakes. Some Pacific Island legends also talk about sea queens or glowing maidens who rise before disaster. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you see the oarfish in motion, it's easy to understand how one fish could launch 1,000 mermaid stories. Alright, so technically not a sea creature, but stick with me, the axolotl might be one of the strangest and most mythical animals on Earth. Found only in the ancient lakes and canals of Mexico, these little amphibians have gills like feathery crowns, wide eyes, and permanently smiling faces. They also have the rare ability to regenerate entire limbs and even parts of their brain. To the Aztecs, the axolotl wasn't just an animal, it was a god. They believed it was the transformation of Xolotl, the twin brother of Quetzalcoatl, who turned himself into a water creature to escape sacrifice. The word axolotl even translates to water dog or water spirit. In Mesoamerican mermaid folklore, there are stories of gilled women who live in sacred lakes and healed the sick. It's easy to imagine a culture encountering a glowing, smiling, regenerating water creature and building entire legends around it. In fact, many locals still believe axolotls bring luck and that harming one invites a curse. That's a lot of weight for one little smiling amphibian. Picture a fish-like creature that washes up on shore with glowing scales, a monkey-like mouth, and hauntingly human eyes. It sounds made up, right? In Japan, this being is called the Ningo, and it's part of local folklore for centuries. Some versions of the story say that eating its flesh grants immortality, but also comes with a terrifying curse. But here's where things get strange. Some historians and researchers believe these stories may have stemmed from real sightings of grotesque deep-sea animals like the stargazer fish, which buries itself in sand with its upward-facing, human-like eyes exposed. Others think fishermen stumbled upon rotting specimens of rarely seen species, mistook them for supernatural beings, and preserved them. In fact, some preserved Ningo mummies still exist in Japanese temples. They're disturbing, misshapen hybrids, usually stitched together from fish and monkey parts, but the devotion they've received over the years suggests people really believed they were once alive. Whether hoax, hybrid, or hallucination, the Ningo legend might just be the creepiest mermaid origin story of all. If you've ever walked along a beach and found a small black pouch with curled tendrils at each corner, congratulations, you found a mermaid's purse. At least that's what folklore called them. In truth, they're the egg cases of sharks, skates, and rays. But for centuries, no one knew that. Old mariners believed these mysterious, leathery pods were literal mermaid eggs. Some said they'd fallen off a mermaid as she climbed onto the rocks. Others claimed finding one meant a sea maiden was nearby spying on humans. In Celtic and Norse legends, these purses were seen as omens, either blessings or curses, depending on the tide and where they were found. It wasn't until marine biology advanced in the 19th century that scientists figured out that these were actually baby shark nurseries. But the nickname mermaid's purse stuck, and to this day, many kids grow up calling them that. It's one of those rare cases where a myth and a scientific fact overlap, because the ocean never gives up its secrets all at once. Okay, this one's gonna sound weird. Sea cucumbers are basically squishy blobs that crawl along the ocean floor, but in several Pacific Island and Southeast Asian legends, they're not just sea slugs, they're shapeshifters. In Polynesian myth, there are tales of sea beings that could morph into women, walk on land, seduce fishermen, and then slip back into the sea as a boneless creature. It sounds like fantasy, but here's where it gets interesting. Some species of sea cucumber can eject their internal organs when threatened and then regrow them. Others can liquefy their bodies and slide through tiny crevices. Early sailors, unfamiliar with these bizarre defense mechanisms, believed sea cucumbers were magical or cursed. In Micronesia, elders speak of ocean spirits with bodies that, quote, melted into the waves. It's not hard to connect the dots between a regenerating, shape-shifting sea creature and the more bizarre mermaid myths. This is nature playing its weirdest cards, and humans, as always, turning those cards into stories. Now imagine it's nighttime. The fog rolls in, the only sound is the gentle lapping of waves until a guttural, human-like wail echoes from the rocks. You're not hallucinating. That scream? It's an elephant seal. Northern elephant seals are massive. Males can grow over 4,000 pounds, and they make some of the eeriest sounds in the animal kingdom. During mating season, they bellow and howl in ways that are disturbingly close to human cries. Early explorers along the California and Alaskan coasts described seeing, quote, grotesque mermaids on the shore, bloated bodies, long faces, wide eyes. Many of these reports likely described elephant seals in the middle of a fight or mating display. There are also Inuit stories of sea women with tragic voices who lured hunters too far from land. Some of those tales might have been inspired by real-life encounters with these beasts. It's a reminder that sometimes the creepiest mermaids aren't graceful or seductive, they are loud, aggressive, and built like a refrigerator with flippers. Our final creature might be the least mermaid-like, but it also might be the most terrifying. The deep-sea anglerfish looks like a demon from a nightmare. The females are huge compared to the males. They have bioluminescent lures growing from their heads and mouths lined with translucent, inward-pointing teeth. They live over a mile deep in the ocean, so deep that sunlight doesn't reach them, and when they rise towards the surface, usually only when dead or dying, they are absolutely horrifying to witness. I'm sure we all remember the anglerfish that went viral on TikTok earlier this year. I miss her. Some siren legends from Greece and West Africa mention sea women who glowed in the dark, hypnotized sailors with strange lights, and devoured men whole. Sound a little familiar? Scientists didn't get a full view of a live anglerfish until the early 2000s. Before that, all we had were creepy, half-rotted specimens. Imagine one of those washing up on shore in the Middle Ages. You'd absolutely think it was a demon or a sea witch. In a way, anglerfish are the purest proof that the ocean has always been full of creatures so bizarre, so alien that our minds did what they always do, turn them into myths.
In Okayama Prefecture in Japan, there's a mysterious mummy that's been unsettling people for centuries, and that's because it's supposedly a mermaid mummy. It's about 30 centimeters long, with the upper body of what looks like a human or humanoid, and the lower body of a fish. It still has hair on its head, teeth, nails, and scales, and its face is frozen in what looks like this silent scream, with its hands pulled up toward its mouth. The artifact's been kept at a temple in Asakuchi, where some people worship it. The temple's chief priest compared the mummy to Amabie, a mythical creature that's said to protect people from plagues. Supposedly, it also grants immortality to whoever tastes its flesh. The mummy, I mean, and I'm not sure anyone's been brave enough to try. According to an old note stored with the mummy, it was supposedly caught in a fishing net somewhere off the coast of Tosa province between 1736 and 1741. Over time, it passed through several hands before ending up at the temple. For years, the mummy was displayed in a glass case for visitors, but now it's stored safely in a fireproof box to protect it from falling apart. Just recently though, researchers from Kurashiki University of Science and the Arts, along with some folklore experts, started studying the mummy for the first time. They're using tests like CT scans and DNA analysis to figure out what it's actually made of. Some mermaid mummies in Japan have been proven to be crafted fakes, usually made by stitching together parts of fish and monkeys, but this one hasn't been officially confirmed yet. Hiroshi Kinoshita, who helped launch the project, says it's a chance to explore not just whether it's real, but what it means in Japanese folklore. For more than 50 years, people in Hawaii have claimed to see a mermaid swimming off the coast of Big Island, but the story is usually written off as local legends. That changed in 1998 when a dive boat captain named Jeff Leitcher said he not only saw the creature, but managed to capture it on film. Leitcher, who runs Jack's Diving Locker, was out on April 12, 1998 with 6 other divers about 20 minutes from Hawaii's Kona coast when something strange happened. I'd heard about her before, Leitcher said. Most of us who are out in these waters regularly have heard stories, but I'd never seen her until that morning. While heading out toward Kaiwi Point, a school of dolphins began swimming alongside their boat when one of the crew members suddenly started shouting and pointing at the water. I couldn't believe what I saw. There, not 10 feet from the bow, was what looked like a nude woman, Leitcher said. She had long flowing hair and one of the most beautiful faces I've ever seen. But there's no way a human being could be swimming so fast. She was keeping right up with the dolphins. Leitcher said the creature then jumped out of the water and said the entire lower half of her was, quote, covered with scales and tapered back into a huge fishtail. She jumped once more, then disappeared under the surface. According to Leitcher, all 10 people on the boat saw it as well, but that wasn't the end of it. About an hour later, while diving at the point, Leitcher said he had another close encounter. Suddenly, I felt something brush against my right leg. She shot by me like a streak of lightning, then turned and came back past me, swimming the other way. I just aimed the camera and started snapping pictures. I kept shooting as she broke the surface and swam away. These photos here were later analyzed by 3 separate photography labs, which all concluded that the images had not been altered or tampered with. I feel very lucky that I'm the one to finally prove to the world what people here have known for half a century, Leitcher said. The Kaiwi Point mermaid is real. Back in 2012, Zimbabwe ran into a strange problem at a couple of dam sites. Workers were so scared of mermaids that they just straight up abandoned their posts. Water Resources Minister Sam Sepepa Nkomo explained the situation during a Senate meeting, saying that workers believed mermaids were living in the reservoirs and pulling people underwater. They were so freaked out that they refused to come back. And hey, fair enough. Doesn't sound worth it to me either. There are plenty of jobs that don't involve getting dragged underwater and drowned by mythical creatures. To try and fix the issue though, the government brought in traditional chiefs to perform rituals to get rid of these mermaids. Nkomo said these ceremonies were done to, quote, exorcise mermaids believed to inhabit reservoirs. Now, thinking the problem might just be some local superstition, Nkomo also tried hiring foreign workers, figuring they wouldn't buy into the stories, but even those workers ended up reporting weird sightings and refused to continue the job. Some people, including Nkomo himself, wondered if dangerous water currents might have been to blame here instead of anything supernatural. But whatever the case, the government went ahead with the traditional rituals to calm everyone down, get work moving again. So I have no idea what really went on here, but what a bizarre story. Now, just what exactly is this sound? It was recorded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, in 1991, and to this day nobody knows what it is, so, I mean, it's gotta be mermaids, right? The upsweep is one of those deep-sea mysteries that scientists still haven't been able to fully explain. What's cool is that unlike other weird ocean sounds that were only picked up once, the upsweep's been recorded every year since 1991. It seems to follow a seasonal pattern, getting louder during certain times of the year and then fading. But even after decades of listening, no one's been able to figure out exactly where it's coming from. Some researchers think it could be connected to volcanic activity deep under the ocean, but some others wonder if the sound might actually be coming from some unknown sea creature we haven't discovered yet. We always hear vague stories about mermaid sightings way back in the day, but do we have any specific accounts? Well, yes, quite a bit actually. In 1603, for example, a farmer named Thomas Reynolds saw what looked like a mermaid in the water off the coast of Wales near Pendine. He called over other people and together they watched the creature for about 3 hours. According to their description, the creature was partly human with the upper body of a woman, but from the waist down it looked like a fish. A man named William Saunders, another local, took the time to carefully examine what Reynolds and the other witnesses had seen. He listened to their stories and found their accounts believable enough to document everything. In fact, the sighting was taken seriously enough that in 1604, just a year later, the story showed up in the paper, along with an illustration to show what they described. The mermaid was recorded as a, quote, monstrous fish that appeared in the form of a woman from her waist upward. A guy in South Africa claimed to have spotted a mermaid-like creature in 2008 in the small village of Surbrak. A man named Daniel Cupido and his mother Dina were near the river around 11:30 at night when they heard a loud banging noise. Cupido said it sounded like someone bashing on a wall, so he went to check it out, and when he got closer, Cupido said he saw something strange thrashing. He described the figure as looking like a, quote, white woman with long black hair thrashing about in the water. Concerned, he tried to help, but as he approached, the creature let out this strange sound that his mother said was so sorrowful her heart couldn't take it anymore. Some believe that what they saw that night may have been what's called a caiman, and I don't mean like caiman like the alligator type animal. The caiman is said to be a half-human, half-fish creature that lives in deep river pools. Surbak tourism officer Maggie Janchi supported the group's story too, saying she personally knew the witnesses and made it clear that they were not people who drank heavily or made up stories. She said she trusted their word and believed that they genuinely saw something that night. Between 1887 and 1913, people along the coast of Deerness and the Orkney Islands kept spotting something strange in the water. Dozens of people, farmers, fishermen, and tourists, reported seeing the same thing over and over. The creature became known as the Deerness Mermaid. One witness described it like this: "It is about 6 to 7 feet in length, has a little black head with neck, a snow-white body and 2 arms, and in swimming, it just appears like a human being. At times it will appear to be siding on a sunken rock and will wave and work its hands." Sightings like this became so frequent in the summer that it pretty much became a part of the local culture. People even wrote plays about it. And then in 1913, off the southeastern coast of Hawaii, another group had their own run-in with something that matched the same description. A fisherman named Ralph Taylor and his crew saw what they thought was a mermaid while checking their lobster pots. Taylor described the account as follows: "It rose out of the water to the height of 3 feet and looked like a lady with a shawl round her shoulders and streaming down her face." The Ningan is a mysterious sea creature that people in Japan have reported seeing over the last several years, and it sounds a little bit like a mermaid. Not the beautiful mermaid we all think of, but a mermaid-like creature. Ningan is said to live in the icy waters of the Antarctic and is described as completely white, human-shaped, and can grow up to 20 to 30 meters long. Witnesses say the creature sometimes has arms, legs, 5-fingered hands, fins, tails. One sighting came from a whale research ship. First, the crew thought they were looking at a foreign submarine, but when they got closer, realized what they were actually looking at was a living creature, which quickly disappeared back under the water. In November of 2007, MU Magazine published a Google Earth screenshot that seemed to capture the Ningan in the South Atlantic Ocean. There have been rumors that the Japanese government keeps detailed records of Ningan sightings, but hasn't made any of them public. Back in 1842, a man named P.T. Barnum, now remembered as the king of circus hoaxes, showed off something he was calling the Fiji Mermaid at his American Museum in New York. Burnham described it himself as an ugly, dried-up, black-looking diminutive specimen, giving it the appearance of having died in great agony. Well, sign me up. People just lined up like crazy to see this thing, a shriveled little corpse with a fish tail and a bony humanoid torso. For a while, people thought they were staring at the remains of a real mermaid. But it turns out this was stitched together by Japanese fishermen, basically the upper half of a monkey sewn to the lower half of a fish. But here's what's pretty interesting. Even after Burnham admitted it was fake, people kept showing up. It worked because they just wanted to believe. I mean, plus, that just sounds like a wild thing to see in person. Versions of the Fiji Mermaid still pop up today in Ripley's museums and roadside sideshows, sometimes made from turtles, sometimes stuffed with paper and glue, but that creepy, janky look is always the same. P.T. Barnum's mermaid took a very old Japanese tradition and brought it to the West, kicking off a whole wave, see what I did there, of mermaid obsession over here. This tiny stitched up thing ended up shaping what a lot of us picture when we hear the words mermaid skeleton. In 2012, this odd looking thing was displayed at the Danish National Museum. It looked like the skeleton of a mermaid. Human bones up top, a long tail instead of legs. There was also a plaque by the display with a very official scientific sounding name, Hydronymphus pesky, like this was some long lost species that had finally been discovered. And for a while, people actually thought it might be legit. The whole thing was actually built by an artist named Millet Rude. It's not entirely fake though. She did use real human bones for the top half. It gives it some authenticity for sure. The tail she made herself though, and she did a damn good job because it looks pretty convincing to me. And then it ended up touring around galleries and zoos, and people kept taking pictures and calling this proof of mermaids. Even now, images of the display are still shared around online, and without context, some swear it's real. It's not, it's just a really good art piece that fooled a lot of people. This isn't the only time Denmark's had a weird encounter with mermaid bones, though. Speaking of mermaid skeletons showing up in odd places, take a look at this. A lot of Copenhagen locals were pretty surprised to see a skeleton with a fishtail while strolling along the waterfront, especially because they're used to seeing this. So one of the most famous tourist spots in Copenhagen is the Little Mermaid statue. It's a small bronze sculpture, only about 4 feet tall, made by Erik Erikson, and based on Hans Christian Andersen's famous fairy tale, The Little Mermaid. The statue's been sitting on a rock by the harbor since 1913, and millions of people have visited, taken photos with it, and called it a national treasure. But in 2010, something unusual happened. The statue was temporarily moved to Shanghai to be part of the Danish pavilion at the World Expo. It stayed there for months from March to November, which left her rock back in Copenhagen completely empty. That's when someone came up with a funny idea. On April 1st, 2010, a mermaid skeleton suddenly appeared near the statue's usual spot. It was sitting in the same pose as the original statue, and for 2 hours people gathered and took photos, entertained but confused and maybe even a little creeped out. I mean, did some wacko attach a fishtail to a human skeleton and put it out on display as some sick joke? Well, kinda. These were actually human bones from the hips up attached to the tail of a swordfish. It was made a few years earlier as part of a museum exhibit about mythical creatures. The prank was put together by Hans Strager, who was the head of exhibitions at the time. Got tons of attention and became one of the most talked about mermaid sightings in Denmark. Around 2011, photos started popping up online of what looked like a pale, half-decayed mermaid corpse lying on the banks of the Vladaya River in Bulgaria. People went wild over this. Headlines screaming "mermaid found" were all over social media, and it makes sense. I mean, if you randomly came across these images at a time before AI could just render stuff like this in 20 seconds, you'd probably do a double take. The thing looked freaky, scaly skin, webbed fingers, and that ghostly pale look with a human-ish shape. Not only that, but it just looked a little too real. But this was actually a super detailed movie prop. The figure was eventually traced back to a man named Joel Harlow, the special effects artist behind Pirates of the Caribbean. It turns out he'd made this mermaid corpse for the films. Somehow, it ended up in the river though. Whether as a prank or entirely by accident, no one's really sure. In the summer of 2019, people hanging out on the beach in Worthing, England spotted something strange leaning against one of the wooden barriers that break up the shoreline. From a distance, it looked like a human skeleton, but the legs were fused together like a tail. Up close, you could see the ribcage and skull looked pretty real. A man named Ben Merchant was one of the first to spot the thing and snapped a photo of it. For a few hours, it had everyone staring and wondering if this thing had actually washed up from the sea. Well, once again, this was an art piece made by local sculptor Rosie Lee. She'd been given part of a skeleton and asked to turn it into something eye-catching, so she created the tail and posed the bones to mimic a mermaid. It didn't fool any scientists, but it still creeped a few people out. Holy crap, this thing is terrifying. I mean, I think I'd rather come across just about anything else washed up on the beach than this. Surprisingly, this freakish looking thing actually showed up on eBay. It isn't listed on there anymore. These photos were shared way back in 2006, but someone bid on this thing. There were so many stories floating around about these mysterious images at the time. Some stories went that the creature was found in Mexico, others said South Africa, the Philippines, the list goes on. But apparently someone came across this thing while exploring Fort de Soto Beach at the southern end of St. Petersburg, Florida. At least that's what the online auction said. Just keep it the hell away from me. In July of 2023, a woman named Bobby Lee Oates was driving along Keppel Sands in Queensland, Australia, looking for a place to camp when something weird caught her eye on the beach. It was this decayed, half-buried skeleton with a long, stretched-out tail and what looked like a human skull sitting right at the top. She snapped some photos and described it as exactly like a mermaid shape. The ribs were showing, the limbs were mostly gone, but the way the bones were laid out, it really did look like some creepy, washed up sea creature. And when the images hit the internet, they went viral. Some thought it might have been a kangaroo leg stretched out and mangled by the ocean. Others said it looked like a badly decomposed dolphin or seal. Marine experts eventually stepped in and said, yeah, it was probably just one of those, just a gross beached carcass, but till this day, we still don't know exactly what this thing was. So technically, we can't rule out mermaids altogether. In 2006, locals in a small town in Malaysia came across this tiny, dried up mermaid mummy about a foot long. It had a shriveled face, little arms, and a tail. In 2014, another one appeared, this time in Papua New Guinea. Almost identical, leathery skin, tiny claws, and that unmistakable mermaid tail. Once again, these were your classic carnival props. The mummies were made by stitching a smaller mammal or monkey's torso onto a fishtail, then drying the whole thing out to look old and mummy-like. These fake mermaids were all over Southeast Asia in the 19th and early 20th centuries, sold to curious tourists and local curiosities collectors. No DNA tests or CT scans have been done on these particular ones, but based on what we know, they're pretty much exactly the same kind of monkey-fish hybrids that P.T. Barnum used in his sideshows. This video is filmed right after a hurricane. We watch as the person holding the camera walks along a beach covered in fallen trees and debris. Then they spot something strange washed up on the sand. At first glance, looks like a big dead fish, but as the camera gets closer, you notice there's hair on it. The person filming keeps moving in and we get a better look. This looks to be a gnarly, mummified mermaid. And not the beautiful, magical version we like to imagine. To be fair, none of the entries on this list really have been. At best, they've been skeleton bones, and at the worst, they've been freakish looking monsters. Now, sure, we've already established that something like this could be faked, and you probably shouldn't need me to tell you that, but if this is a hoax, it's pretty well done. One of the top comments on the video from user Cajun2197 says, I have seen real mummies. This looks frighteningly real. The skin pulled back around the mouth as it dried, bulging eyes, taut cheekbones, the ribs and pelvis under dark, dried flesh. The fins brittle, exactly like a dead fish drying in the sun. In a temple in Okayama, Japan, there's this tiny 12-inch mermaid that people thought had been caught in a fishing net sometime between 1736 and 1741. It's kept in a box, sometimes displayed in a glass case. The legend goes that eating the flesh could make you live forever. But scientists from Kurashiki University CT scanned it and found almost no real bones inside. The torso is mostly cloth, paper, cotton, even sand and charcoal held together by metal pins. On the surface, they did find fish skin and mammal hair, pufferfish parts on the arms, and the jaw and teeth from a predatory fish, plus claws that looked like they came from a lizard. The CT scans showed clear wooden stakes running through it to keep the shape intact, but it's still pretty cool because it is an old artifact. Radiocarbon dating says it probably dates to the late 1800s.